going to appear during its installation. Your options are Silent Installer Administrator. This is the default. When you use the Silent Installer, nothing visible will happen on the user's machine. The user can be logged in, they can be running applications. They won't actually see anything happening except usually a little bit of hard disk activity. In addition, if the application that you're deploying has icons, at the end of the installation process, the icons will appear either on the desktop or the Start menu, wherever the installer package puts it. But under Silent Installer, nothing else can be seen. Now, obviously, one thing which is important there is that you cannot put reboots into your install script if you're running the Silent Installer. That is something that users tend to notice. If you need to reboot, we then recommend instead that you use one of the visible installer methods. The most common visible installer method is administrator. So again, this is when the application that you're installing requires administrative privileges to install, and that goes for the majority of applications that you will install. In the case of a visible installation, you will get several options. What RDMC will do is bring up a window specifying that an installation is about to occur. You can customize the message that's displayed to the users, and they will be given a countdown. Again, a period of time that you specify by default. It's a 2-minute countdown. At the end of that 2-minute time, the machine will automatically shut down and reboot. It will come back up with the mouse and keyboard locked so the users cannot interfere, and more importantly so that they cannot access the machine whilst it's logged in as an administrator. It will then bring up the RDMC installation window and it will install the applications that you've selected. When you're doing a visible installation of this sort, you can include as many reboots as you require and other items like that. And again, each time there's a reboot, it will automatically shut down the machine, restart, log back in again, and continue with the installation until it's complete. Once the installation is complete, it will reboot the machine one last time. It will unlock the keyboard and mouse and leave the machine sitting at the logon prompt for the user to log back in. You again also have the ability to specify a message to appear to the user at the end of the installation process. I mentioned about locking the keyboard and mouse. That is this option here, Disable Keyboard and Mouse. It is strongly recommended that you use this option because when the machines have rebooted, it will be logged in as an administrator and users will be able to get admin access to the machine during the period that the application deployment is going on. One thing I should mention is if there is a problem and you need to gain access to the machine, such as the installation is stalled because of a problem with an installation package or some other issue, if you've locked the keyboard and mouse, you can't access the machine yourself to fix it. The easy way around this is that if you use the remote control software, you can remote control with keyboard and mouse. It's only the physical keyboard and mouse on the device that are locked, so when you remote control, you can still access the machine properly. You've also got options here to specify that the RDMC installer will always be the application in focus, which you would normally do. That way, application install windows appear behind it where they can't be seen, and that it always has keyboard focus. The last option is Visible Installer Current User. This is not one that gets used a great deal. Every now and again you'll come across an application, and usually this will be older applications, which require that it is installed under the account of the user who will be running the program itself. If that's a requirement, then you can use Visible Installer Current User. And what that one will do is, without rebooting the machine, the RDMC client will pop up in a similar method to the way it does with the Visible Installer, tell the user that an installation is about to take place, but instead of shutting down the machine and logging on as an administrator, it will actually run the install under the account that's currently logged on. Obviously, it's essential that that particular user has the access to the system that's required to be able to do that, but if you've got an application that must be installed under the current user, it's assumed that that will be the case. So that one can be useful, but it's not one that I would expect people would use very often. Now, simple rule to choose between whether you deploy using Silent Installer or Visible Installer. For 90% of your applications, you will use a Silent Installer. There's very few cases where you don't need to. The only cases where you are likely to need to use the Visible Installer is if reboots will be required, or if the application is incapable of installing silently, which is not usually a problem, but there are a few applications, mainly older ones again, which don't like installing unless they're actually running on the visible desktop. Other cases in which you would need to use a Visible Installer would be, for example, deploying a Service Pack update to Microsoft Office. If the user is currently logged in and using Office, then the Office update would fail, in which case by using the Visible Installer it forcibly reboots the machine, at which time Office won't be running, and it allows it to update the application while it's not currently in use. It's also worth mentioning that, like all things within RDMC, it is possible to schedule application deployments. So you can specify a time in the evening to say, wake up any machines that aren't currently switched on, log them in as an administrator, run these installations, shut them down again. So if you've got a requirement to install something that cannot be done whilst the user is on the machine, it's actually a good idea to schedule it unless it's really urgent. So we'll now skip on to the next screen. We've got the standard installer settings. Most of these you won't need to change, so I won't go into any real details on them. Probably the only one which I would mention at the moment is this one, disable the pre and post installation messages. Now, I mentioned to you that you've got the option to specify a message prior to shutting the machine down and rebooting, and also to show an installation message after the installation is complete. If you're not doing a visible deployment, this is obviously not something that you actually necessarily want to do. You don't want to actually notify the user that you're doing it, because the maintenance can be done without their knowledge. So we'll set up a silent install by ticking disable pre and post installation messages. This means that no message will be displayed to the user, but also the installation will start immediately. That means as soon as you hit go, the machines are going to start responding and installing the application straight away. This one here, by the way, is the attempt wake on LAN. So particularly if you're scheduling a deployment to go, use that one, and that tells RDMC to attempt to wake up any machines that aren't currently awake prior to doing that. Retry failed deployment is another important one. Basically, each machine will send installation status back to indicate whether or not it's run successfully. If for whatever reason RDMC cannot access a machine because it's switched off and can't be woken up, or for any number of other reasons, by having this option checked, you can specify the number of minutes. So in this case, it defaults to 59. This means that it'll wait for an hour. After that time, it will go back and attempt again to deploy the software packages to the machines that failed. The ones which have already succeeded will be left alone, but only the failed machines will be tried again. And it will continue to run this loop until you either stop it or until all of the machines in the list have been successfully updated. Okay, we'll go to the next step. This section is called staggering. This can be very useful if you're planning to deploy a large application to a large number of machines. A good example of this would be something like SAP, which is 600 megs. If you're installing that to a large number of machines, it can cause you some network problems. If you've got 100 machines simultaneously installing 600 megs worth of software, it can definitely cause some network congestion. So what you can do here is specify stagger the deployment, and basically you tell it how many machines to do at a time and how long to wait. So in this case, it will send off the installation to a group of 10 machines, it will deploy the application, wait for 10 minutes, and then send it out to the next batch. That way it will gradually roll through, and by keeping the number of machines per batch relatively low, then you can reduce the impact on the network of the installation that you're currently running. Okay, final stage, which is only in the deployment wizard, start the software deployment on completion, which we won't actually do because we're not going to roll this one out just yet. It will now show you a summary of the rules that you've set up. Hit finish, and this will take you to your list of machines. Now from here, very, very simple. To proceed with the installation, we simply hit the green arrow and it will start by deploying the application to the machines that you've specified. Now in a moment, what I'll do is I will go back and I'll show you how to select individual machines, and we'll deploy the application to a single machine only. I should also mention that you've got the ability in the software deployment wizard to save each of the settings that you've put together so that you can use them again in the future without needing to customize again. To access this, simply display the properties, go into your deployment properties and installation profiles, type in a name, so this will be the Adobe Acrobat deployment, save that. What this means is that in the future, if you want to run the same installation run again, you can simply select it from the list, load it, and all of the settings that you've put in together will come back up. It's also important to know that you can customize them again, so it's also very handy if you've customized your deployment settings and the next time you want to do something similar, you can load those base settings and only change the bits that you need to change. And so typically, for example, if you've set up all of your preferences for doing a silent application deployment, then you would simply load that pre-configured one, go into installation container and simply change the list of applications to deploy. If you